because Kenny remains in his leadership position? It doesn't matter. What matters is that it's an independence-focused government that will do those things that I just said. Then what happens? Immediately, the first piece of legislation is this. You implement the Alberta Sovereignty Act. The Alberta Sovereignty Act does a number of things. One of them is to create new banking regulations for Service Credit Union and ATB that take them out from under federal regulatory control. Why that's important is because it will protect depositors from CRA. In addition, to that, of course, you rapidly take control of policing, pensions, immigration, employment insurance, and provincial tax collection, all legitimately, that can be legitimately done within the current framework of Confederation. By taking control of provincial tax collection, you're setting the stage for taking control of federal tax collection. Now, so once you've done that, and that can be done within the first 24 months of being elected. And in the course of those 24 months, you're doing some other things. You're working also to help educate the public on the rationale and merits of independence, how that government will make it happen, and how that government will assuage the concerns that people may have regarding independence. Now, that successful referendum then takes place, say, no later than 30 months because that's the time of the midterm municipal elections. Assume a mandate is given to that government with a successful referendum. Now, Alberta has negotiating power. It has leverage because it doesn't have it in any other way. There is no other leverage other than that successful referendum on independence that can do it. Okay, so you go from there, you've got that referendum on independence, and you give a timeline. And you say, we will negotiate with the federal government for 6 to 12 months. So for the people who want Alberta to stay in Confederation, that's fine. We accede to that request by negotiating with Ottawa and the provinces for 6 to 12 months, very much like Brexit negotiated with the rest of the European Union, but they put a time limit on it, and they said, after this date, this is the way it's going to be. After 12 months, for example, if we don't have the deal that we want, a la casa, we're gone. So the Alberta Prosperity Project, to be crystal clear, we're not a party. We are a project. And what we intend to do is to grow the membership to such a colossal amount that we will control the outcome of the 2023 election. Let me explain. So we grow the membership to 500,000 to 1 million or more people. Why is that important? Well, I'm going to explain something. It's called the 3.5% rule. And that was coined by a lady, a Harvard professor by the name of Erica Chenoweth, who studied societal movements for a couple hundred years. And she determined that 3.5% of the population can change the direction of that society. Now, when you think about that, and put it in the context of the last provincial election, when Jason Kenney and the UCP were elected, they had 120,000 members. That is 3.5% of the voting public. Think about that. 500,000 members of our project is 15%. 1 million is 30%. So it's really important to understand that because that is our objective. That is our goal, to grow the project to 500,000, 1 million or more people, and this is the way we're going to do it. We're setting up educational chapters throughout the province, 100, 150 educational chapters that will share this message. We've got chapter development occurring consequent every time we do a rally. And I think Shannon will, who knows a little bit more about where we're actually at, can make some comments a little later. Now, in addition to that, we're rolling out a massive educational program throughout the province as well. We're using a professional marketing and advertising company that we're working with, and we expect to launch, I think it's next Friday. I'm very excited about that. And so you're going to see a lot more information coming. You might see a billboard, a digital billboard that says, "What would you want if you knew what you can have?" APP. That'll stimulate the mind. What the heck is that? And then a little later, what would you want if you knew what you could have? A truck or a pump jack and that. A little later, the next one, freedom, prosperity. So, in any case, it was just a fun little ditty that I wanted to throw in there. But at the end of the day, there is a petition that's been crafted by Jeff Rath, who's a constitutional and litigation lawyer on our board. It's a legal petition to force the government, the provincial government, to hold a referendum on independence. So if you're interested, I'd encourage you to sign that petition. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close with this comment. Freedom is not free. And prosperity can't occur without freedom. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will seriously consider getting involved with us and helping us grow that membership to 500,000 to 1 million or more people. And I actually do have one other comment to make, and that is the leaders and potential leaders of the UCP and other independence parties are courting us because they know what we're doing, which has never, ever been done before, has the potential to win. And they want our support. So our support, ladies and gentlemen, is your support. So come together so that we can, at some point, if it's Brian Jean, who's the leader of the UCP, or someone else who's the leader of a combined independence party, says we would like your support, we can say, well, you can have our support, but here's what you need to do. You need to embrace the policies and governance and the bylaws that we're proposing, and that you will hold an honest referendum on independence, and you will commit legally to protect our interests, our individual freedoms and rights, and our prosperity, and hold that referendum on independence, like I said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. So I do have a handful of questions here. If you have a question on a card, just put your hand up and Pam will run around or somebody will grab it. So we'll have Michael and Dennis answer these questions. You guys can just decide. Sure. This whole separation has been tried before. Why do we think it will be successful this time?
Well, we never really tried separation in the sense of going for a referendum. There was, the most successful independence movement until now has been the Western Canada Concept. And they, in 1982, like I mentioned, they won that by-election and they got a lot of momentum. The party started growing rapidly. But actually what killed the party, well, there was a provincial election a few months later. Peter Lougheed actually called an early provincial election because he saw the growth of the WCC and he wanted to undermine that growth. He had to cut the legs out of it because he saw that it could actually win. But before the election, there was a lot of infighting in the party. Gordon Kessler, he won the leadership campaign. There were other people who wanted to be leader. Some of them then went and started their own organizations. But to make a long story short, and this is something, it's always been part of the movement that there's been infighting. And that's always undermined, the strength of the movement going forward. So the movement itself has been undermined by the infighting, but we've never had a referendum. We've never come close to having a referendum. So it's not like we've actually tried separation. We've tried to organize movements, and the movements have been kind of undermined inadvertently from within. Like nobody was trying to break it up. It was just that, in conservative circles, many people have mentioned, conservative minded people are independent-minded people. And we know, like, many of the people are very successful in the independence movement, and they've been successful in their businesses. They know a way to succeed. That's because that's what they've experienced. And so they want it to be done their way because that's what succeeded for them. And when you bring a bunch of people together who have been successful in different ways, sometimes it's hard for them to work together. I mean, it's just a human nature kind of thing. It's not a sinister kind of a thing. But still, we need to overcome these kind of divisions in order to build an organization that, you know, can accomplish what Dr. Modry has been talking about. So I think it's the internal division that has undermined the movement, and so we really haven't tried separation. It can work. When we get a successful referendum, it will work.
Hello? No, it's not working. I was just teasing.
Oh.
Actually, you know, I agree with Michael, but there's more to it. There's not been sufficient incentive, okay? And I think we're at a tipping point where there is sufficient incentive if people really understand what the future is if we do nothing. I also want to point out something that's kind of a little interesting vignette. In 2003, Ralph and I were very close. We were good friends, and I helped him out on a number of things. But at the annual general meeting in Red Deer, we were just chatting alone, and I said, Ralph, I think I've got a solution to fix the dysfunctional relationship between Alberta and Ottawa. Would you like to hear about it? He says, you do? And I says, yeah. And he says, yeah, absolutely. I said, well, it's based on this question. Ralph, if you were the president or the prime minister of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? And he looked at me and he smiled. I always remember this answer. He said, to ask the question is to know the answer. Of course not. So I said, well, then the corollary is don't you think you and caucus have a moral and an economic responsibility to fix this dysfunctional relationship? He said, yeah, I guess we do. And I said, well, okay. I've started drafting a document that I think will help you achieve that objective. And let me get it finalized. And so for the next few months, I worked diligently on this document, ran it through many business people, constitutional lawyers, academics, other politicians, many business people and professionals, probably close to 100. I wanted to be sure. And so I presented the document to him in August of 2003 in his office, and we're chatting, and it was entitled Alberta at the Crossroads, Status Quo, Refederation, Autonomy. But in that document, it had the key, and the key was leverage. And when you read the executive summary, it points out clearly the need for a referendum on independence, and then how to educate the public later on. So Ralph said to me after we spent a couple of hours chatting about it, he said, would you like to present it to caucus? And I said, sure. And then I was unable to because the chief of staff told me I couldn't because it was a document about independence. And I said, no, it was a document about leverage. But here's the point that I'm getting at after that short vignette, was that Alberta was booming at that time, and there was no incentive for Alberta to leave. But we now have tremendous incentive because we're on a downhill spiral, and it will continue to be seriously compromised if we just sit back and do nothing. What's the next question?
I have the thing back, thanks. The next question. What will a separate Alberta use for a military?
Our own military. So that's a very, very good question, because some people would be concerned, for example, would there be, to answer the question explicitly, yeah, we would form our own military. And actually, we have a white paper already drafted on doing that. We have military people involved with us. So That's one answer, but I want to touch on something else because some people might be concerned that with respect to the independence movement, there might be a military incursion by the Canadian government's forces into Alberta. I think that would not happen for a couple of reasons, because Alberta would be remaining as a Commonwealth country. Prior to the referendum, we will have discussed the issue of military concerns, not only with the military stationed in Alberta, but also with the military in the U.S. When the Quebec secessionist movement occurred, there was no concern about a military incursion to prevent Quebec from seceding. Plus the fact the international recognition of a people's self-determination is based on a successful referendum on independence. So I think I'm very confident there wouldn't be a military incursion. But yeah, we do already have plans, along with our own police force, we would have our own military as well.
What he said, that's good.
How important is this movement to the First Nations? Have the First Nations come on board? Will there still be reserves, or will the First Nations be able to own their own land and pay taxes like everyone else?
Yeah, very good question. You know, the independence of Alberta is contingent upon First Nations and the Métis supporting this movement. We will never have international recognition without their support. So the intention is for the vision. The vision is for Alberta to become a brand new sovereign constitutional republic that recognizes the supremacy of God as foundational to its constitution, to the rule of law and civil society, wherein Alberta becomes the most free and prosperous nation in the world to live, work, raise a family, start a business, and where First Nations are partners in the creation of this new nation, if you will. They have to be at the table working with us. Now, as far as owning land for the Indigenous population, on reservations, yes, of course, they will be able to own their own land. And yes, they will not have to pay taxes on there, because that is something that they were promised a long time ago. It is not appropriate to take that away from them. But I want to tell you something that is really exciting to think about. There should not be any concern that First Nations has a better deal than the rest of us. If they're living on a reservation, don't pay property tax. How many people would be concerned, fussed, for example, if they didn't have to pay property tax as well, or if they were paying a fraction of the property tax that they're currently paying? Because that's the objective, and that is achievable with an independence, for Alberta. So First Nations, we have on our board Lawrence Corderoy, and Lawrence is First Nations chief. He's run a $100 million business, a very bright guy. And of course, Jeff Rath, who's on our board as well. Constitutional lawyer, litigator, has been working with First Nations for decades, and the two of them believe that they can deliver 90 to 95% of the First Nations and Métis to independence.
I should just take his microphone. He's not answering any questions. Does 3.5% mean Alberta Prosperity Project or votes of Independence Party? Can you expand on that? Or votes for an independent party?
Right. So what we're after here is, like I said, we want 1.5 million people that when I say influence the outcome of the election, that when you are a member, then you're getting all of the information that we're putting out so that you understand how education benefits, how healthcare benefits, how social services benefit, how immigration is improved, et cetera, et cetera. So there should be something more in this, but so So the whole idea is that number of people that are aligned with understanding the rationale and the merits of independence will support a party that will commit to protecting your individual freedoms and rights and your prosperity. It's really that simple. It's not complicated. It's just that nobody's ever done it before. So that's our task as the Alberta Prosperity Project, is to educate people on this so that when you go to the polls in 2023, you are armed with the knowledge of what party that you're going to vote for. Now, because we're nonpartisan and nonprofit, we can't tell you which party to vote for, but we can strongly urge you to vote for a party that will actually, honestly, protect your interests, your individual freedoms, rights, and prosperity. It's really not that complicated. It's amazing that nobody's ever thought of doing this before. But that's what we need to do. And I don't really have any other comment to that. Do you want me to amplify it somehow? No, this one doesn't work. Oh, use this one.
I thought I could have my own. So, there is a question here. It says, what is involved with starting a chapter? So Dennis kind of alluded to that. And so basically, I'm the chapter coordinator, I suppose, because I used to be a teacher. So, and I no longer have a classroom. So everywhere I go is now a classroom, like Walmart, the gas station, wherever I am. It's just like Alberta Prosperity Project. It's right over here by the peanut butter. So basically what we have is we will give you all of the information that you need, like flyers, pamphlets, support, any questions that you have. I'll even come there and help you spread the Alberta Prosperity Project mission, message, values, vision, goals, because we want to reach every single corner of this province with this message so that every single person in this province knows that this can happen, that this is possible, and how to get it done. It's really easy to start a chapter. You just come and tell me, hey, Shannon, I want to start a chapter, and you're pretty much in. That's how it works. So this says, thank you. I've always tried to get through to people, and you are the man, together with Michael. Must mean you're the man, together with Michael. The current methodology is to indoctrinate kids to become followers. We must reach the high schoolers. Will you be able to talk to high school kids the same as you have done here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And we've strategized how we're going to achieve that objective as well. So part of the massive marketing and advertising program, as you know, young people these days are big into social media, right? So there's going to be tremendous opportunities to engage with them, and in very interesting and fun sort of ways that will be engaging for them. So that's part of it. The other thing is that we're hoping and we're planning that there will be chapters that we'll be developing within the various universities as well. And getting to the high schools is also another matter. So we have plans for that. And we'll try and roll them out to the best of our ability. But you all have children and or grandchildren, and maybe even grand-grandchildren. And is there anybody here with grand-grandchildren? I'm not sure. But in any case, you get my point, is that you can be talking to them as well and engage with them in a way in which, for example, if you want to engage with them on a discussion about the oil industry, because I've already been indoctrinated into thinking that this is just the worst thing ever, ask them if they have a cell phone to give it to you. Okay, and say, well, you can't have this. Well, why can't I have it, Mom or Dad? Well, because it comes from the oil industry. So think of all of the things. Go to the website or go to just Google the products that emanate from a barrel of oil, and then start asking them what they can do without. In other words, engage with them in a fun sort of way. Okay, and then you gradually can point out the fact that we can't go back to the Stone Age.
You're answering. He's not getting a chance.
That's okay. That's okay.
These next two questions kind of go together. It says, have you had these meetings in urban centers? What were your results? What percentage of urban voters do you expect for independence from Edmonton and Calgary? They're predominantly NDP centers.
Excellent question. Believe it or not, we have many NDP supporters. Why? Because they too are interested in freedom and prosperity. So we have started in the rural community for obvious reasons. One is that we want to hone our message. We want to hear the questions from people like you so that when we get into the urban centers, that we will be very effective in answering them. On our website, coming very shortly, is a frequently asked question section as well, which is going to deal with all kinds of things, splitting the vote, pensions, being landlocked, that kind of thing, etc. So our first urban center presentation is coming up in Sherwood Park. And so we'll see how that goes. And that is the plan. I mean, we know we need to win the major urban centers, and that's coming. So there you go.
This next question is going to be for Michael. What about being landlocked?
Actually, I mean, that's the common one that comes up, but I don't see that being a problem at all. I mean, there's so much material that's shipped across from BC to Eastern Canada. It has to go across Alberta. So that gives us tremendous negotiating power. I mean, Canada's not going to try and commit suicide just to prevent Alberta from becoming independent. You know, if we get a real majority vote on a clear question for referendum, I mean, it only makes sense for Canada to want to negotiate. I mean, we might as well just get the best deal for both sides then. And that will involve, you know, the transit of goods. We'll allow goods from BC to, you know, to Eastern Canada and from Eastern Canada across Alberta. And they'll allow our stuff to be exported on the West Coast as well. Like it doesn't make sense to me that they would try and block us, because then we can block them as well. And that causes them tremendous difficulty. Why would they engage themselves in that tremendous economic problems just to cause us trouble? Like it doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of like committing suicide just to prevent Alberta from being independent. It doesn't make sense to me. So I do not think that being landlocked will be a problem. And of course, there's many landlocked countries around the world now that work just fine. And also, we'll have the United States as well. So unless the United States was to agree with Canada to trap us in, we would be able to ship a lot of stuff down through the United States. I mean, it's already our biggest market. Most of our products go there, so we still have that. And I'm sure, well, it's very likely that the Americans, if Canada tried to block us, that the Americans would let us get our materials through that way as well. So I do not see that as a genuine obstacle to Alberta independence at all.
Yeah. I just want to add to Michael's comments, and he's right, 95% of our trade goes south. But in addition to that, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Articles 124 and 125, give landlocked countries access to tidewater, such as with the case with Switzerland. We already know, for example, that northern BC is aligned with us with respect to access, and then independent Alberta discussions have already taken place with BC, central BC and northern BC with respect to aligning with us on independence. That's another issue that people need to understand. And also, to take it a step further, in terms of transport of goods and services across our borders, east and west, it wouldn't be, he's correct, it wouldn't be in the interest of the rest of Canada and BC to embargo Alberta, because not only could we impose massive tariffs on every product that crosses our borders, but we could block them all together. In addition to that, a no-fly zone over Alberta. So it really. I forgot about the missiles as well, but in any case.
Will Alberta maintain her mineral rights?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we'd actually have a stronger claim on those rights as an independent country than we do as a province. Like, our mineral rights are now protected by the Canadian Constitution. But if we're independent, we'll have our own constitution, and that'll actually, it'll probably strengthen what we have. I mean, it would not diminish from our rights in any respect from the resources that the province controls, and would probably strengthen them. So there's nothing we would lose in terms of mineral rights by becoming independent.
The only thing we'd be losing would be the lead brains in Ottawa.
Will we need our own currency? What will back this?
Yeah, that's another good question. And Tanner Naday, who's our economist, has been working on this as well. But here's the conclusion for the time being, is that what we would do is we would set up our own currency. It could become the strongest currency in the world. In the beginning, it would be, when it's set up, it would be, we would want it to be backed by gold, other precious metals, our natural resources, because they're so massive. So that, in a very real way, gives us an incredibly valuable dollar. But something important to understand is that once we are in the process of getting ready to have a referendum on independence, the Canadian currency will start dropping, particularly if there's a sense that Alberta is going to get out. With a successful referendum on independence, the currency will drop even more. And failed negotiations with Ottawa will drop it even more. So we're not in the position to be a financial advisor, but you might want to think of putting your liquid assets into a currency that would not be affected by Alberta independence. You can also buy gold as well. So we will develop, the very best thing is if we can develop a gold standard and back our currency with gold. But we have to get the gold first.
How will concerns for old age security and other sources of income be addressed when Alberta becomes independent?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's like I said earlier, what's really important to understand is that we overfund the pension plan by $3 billion a year. All of that $3 billion would go right back into enhancing the pensions of people who are already retired and receiving their pension, and also to top up the pension of contributions of people that are already working and contributing to that. And be the same thing with old age security. Like I said, the retention of $33 billion or more would very significantly help everybody. In other words, you've heard the line, a rising tide lifts all boats. But in this case, it would be a tidal wave lift. It would be really massive. So I'm excited about that. Hey, listen, I'm a senior. I know you think I'm in my teens, but I'm actually a senior. And yeah, even I could benefit, maybe. Who knows? But that's the answer. You need not be worried. For example, if you lived in France, as an example, you would still get your Canadian pension. So if you're living in Alberta, you would still get your Canadian pension. It's just that we would be able, as an Alberta citizen, to top it up significantly, and we would.
There's about 4 more questions here. So what happens to the national parks?
They become the Alberta National Parks.
What would our independent healthcare system look like?
Oh, I love this one. Oh, yeah. So I've written a paper entitled Medicare is Killing Us, Reengineering the Healthcare System. I can tell you that at every single level of the way in which healthcare is delivered, there are opportunities for improvement. And it doesn't have to do anything at all with respect to the wages of nurses and physicians, for example. They're paid appropriately. There's no question about that in my mind. The system is corrupt and dysfunctional. You have to understand, how many people have had to wait to get in to see a physician or a surgeon because they needed something? Yeah, so you know access is a terrible problem. Our system functions in the lowest quartile in the world, and its cost is in the highest quartile. The opportunities for fixing healthcare are amazing in terms of improving access, solving the problem of access all the time, and improving quality and reducing costs. We don't need to spend more money. We can spend less money and make it better. Here's an example, just one simple thing. Why does the government own hospitals? They don't need to. They can't run them anyhow. Why not have a smart business run those hospitals that knows how to be effective? It can be a nonprofit, very much like Kaiser Permanente in the US, for example.
The next question has to do with digital ID and digital currency. How will the Alberta Prosperity Project prevent control by the digital ID and one digital currency system?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Why would we even want to implement a digital ID? We're a sovereign nation, we're independent, we don't need to do that, and we wouldn't. Second thing is it's like I said, with respect to a digital ID, you get to be pinned, categorized, cataloged, tracked, and controlled. So who wants that? Nobody. And it's the same thing with respect to a digital currency. Now, is it possible to have a digital currency that could work, that the government, even if it was a benevolent Alberta sovereign constitutional government, yeah, it is. You'd have to implement a blockchain type technology because that's immutable, it can't be changed, and it can't be accessed by somebody that shouldn't be there. So there would never be a situation in which, as far as I am concerned, and if you look at the governance section of the policy and governance document, you'll see that we simply wouldn't allow that to happen. But remember, we're not government, we're a project. That's what you guys want, and that's the thing that you have to tell the new government in 2023, because we're going to win this.
In regards to the monetary system, you say it will be based on gold. We'll need to get it. What is the plan?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, actually, there's two ways to get it. How many people have watches and gold rings? That's one way. I'm teasing, of course. No, there's two ways we get gold. One is, remember, we have massive wealth that's going to be generated. You know, when the boom times in the 70s, there was massive international investment in Alberta. That will continue. So with the largesse that that Alberta will receive, one, you can purchase gold. Number two, you can mine for gold. That's how we would do it.
With the track record we have with the federal government, why do you seem set on negotiating with them? The best way to handle a dysfunctional relationship is to cut all ties.
I'm just a sensitive guy. No, here's the deal, is that most of us in this room are in favor of Alberta independence. Do you think that is the prevailing opinion throughout the province right now? No. So there are many people who want, as a dozen or 15 or so people here who raised their hand, that want Alberta to remain in Confederation. I think we have an obligation to negotiate in good faith. And because we want to unite those people who want a better deal within Confederation and those people who want Alberta to become an independent nation. And they need to be united on the necessity for leverage. They need to be united on the necessity for negotiating power. And the only negotiating power, the only leverage that we potentially can have is that successful referendum on independence. That should be unifying. So for the people who want a better deal within Confederation, I think we have an obligation, and it would be a legal obligation as well, to negotiate in good faith for what we want for a period of 6 to 12 months. This does not need to be dragged out, but that would be my answer.